It is 6:30, and I will call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Heller?
Here.
Councillor Eber?
Here.
Councillor Holland? Here. Councillor McGuire?
Here.
Councillor Robinson?
Here.
Councillor Fisher?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is audience participation. Thank you. We have Tori Leviton. And as a reminder, you have 5 minutes, and please ask decorum from the audience. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. For those who don't know me, my name is Tori Leviton, 3901 East Quincy Avenue. Two things. First, thank you again for the honor of serving on PTRC. Conservation is my #1 passion. I will continue to advocate for open spaces for the rest of my life, as I have since 3rd grade. And second thing is my second passion are the arts. I hope you had a wonderful show on Sunday. Did have it in mind. I didn't get back from the mountains in time. This is the 3rd year of Summerfest at John Mead Park. It's going to be June 21st and June 28th. It's going to be from 4 to 6 p.m. I don't know about a rain check, but the pavilions seem to have worked pretty well. 2 years ago, there was a little sprinkle and it didn't seem to slow anything down. So I'm going to hopefully go for rain or shine, but I can't guarantee it. Hopefully it'll just be great weather on those 2 Saturdays. We have singers, we have violinists, we have trumpet players, and I'm looking for some extra performers. If there's any variety acts that you guys know of, or you want to participate, or you have kids or grandkids, or it doesn't have to be any talent, it's just for fun. Hoping to maybe get a juggler there this year. So let me know if you have any questions, and I think you can reach out to Laura for my contact information, or I have business cards as well, but that's all. So come to Summerfest and let me know if you'd like to participate or know someone who would.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
We will move on to the consent agenda, or I'm sorry, reports from members of city boards and commissions. Seeing none, move on to the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda items 6A through F.
Second. It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll move on to unfinished business, which is the update on the citywide cellular communication study. Director Goldie.
Actually, I'm going to kick this off.
Okay. City Manager Kramer.
So tonight we do have with us, as you can see on the screen, via our fancy device that we have here, participating remotely, our consultants that we've had throughout this process, Andrew and Per. So just to set the table for this conversation, most of this conversation tonight will be by Andrew, our main consultant. Just to refresh everyone where we are, in January of this year, there was a presentation regarding the final report for an effort that was undertaken that was a little over a year to evaluate opportunities for improving cellular service in the village. After considering some criteria that would be placed on that effort, one option emerged, 3 towers of 100 feet at city parks. At that meeting, no action was taken on that particular option. However, there were some other options that were taken or that were discussed by residents, and council directed staff to evaluate some of those options. And it's been very clear from the start that council wants to consider all options. It's not like anything is off the table. We want to make sure that these options have been explored. So as a result of that, we met with some technical folks who were in the field who happen to also be residents of Cherry Hills Village. We kicked around C-band, We had some discussions regarding satellite service. But through those conversations, a new possibility did start to emerge. And I will say possibility because we are not here tonight. First of all, we're not here tonight to discuss the 3 100-foot towers. That council has not directed us to continue that effort. So while that is, we are not here to discuss that. What we are here to do is to provide a status update regarding that one option that is a possibility. And all we're really asking for council to do tonight is to hear the technical side of what this option is and how much it could improve service within the village. And there'll be lots of discussion, I'm sure, right? It's not just as simple as I made it sound. I wish it were that easy. If there is interest in pursuing this option further, all we're asking for is for council to direct staff to continue conversations, specifically reaching out to the owners of the towers in question that you'll hear about shortly, to just have initial conversations. We're not asking council to decide to do this new option that's being discussed tonight. Does it even have merit? If it doesn't have enough of a benefit for the village, we didn't really want to waste time and we didn't want to be presumptuous with what council's direction was. So that's really the purpose of us checking in tonight. Any questions before I turn it over to our technical experts?
I think that's great. Thank you.
No problem. Andrew, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Just fine. And you might just remind everybody who you are and we can get started.
Well, I am an industry wireless professional. I've been doing this for more than 46 years. So I've designed a lot of networks and looked at a lot of networks, and really my whole goal in life has been to improve the experience of anybody who's using phones and wireless devices. I've worked for almost every wireless carrier. I've worked for many different equipment providers and everything, so I have a good handle on what's going on. And honestly, I feel fortunate to be able to help people with having issues, because sometimes they're difficult to get through, and actually identifying why things don't work as well as you'd like them to. So, but I'm here to help tonight. All right, this is the agenda. Essentially, the overall goal is to explore opportunities of upgrading the existing DAS that's been in your village for more than 10 years. I think it's almost 15 years now. And currently it's not doing a good job at providing good service for the town in the locations where it is. And after evaluating and taking a look at all the different nodes and how they're situated, we've took a look and come up with some solutions, really just getting the poles above the tree height and the clutter. Right now they're being blocked by a lot of the trees in the system. So I did a full technical analysis on how to improve that, and there's definitely room for improvement to be able to do that. And I did it just with the thought of just increasing the overall city quality of the signal that you're getting in different areas. So, and I'll cover that further on in the presentation here. Next slide. Currently, on all 13 of these different poles throughout the city, all of the major wireless carriers are on them. They just have because they're buried in a lot of the tree clutter and unable to transmit beyond a certain distance. They're good right where the poles are, but as soon as you get away from the poles on the road or on either side of it, the signals radically decrease, so you don't get a lot of good coverage out of them. So all the carriers for many years have wanted to get an upgrade or something done, to help improve the coverage in the area. But it's been various different things over time that just prevented that from happening until we really took a good deep evaluation of this. Slide. So here's an example of one of the nodes in the existing network that's in Cherry Hills. They're typically on 30-foot poles, mostly on 30-foot, but the antennas are mounted right around the 20-foot level, which puts them well below the trees. The antennas are very, very old, very low gain and narrow patterns. They're pretty much aligned along the roadways to really enhance the roadway coverage, but nowhere else. It's very old technology. It was originally designed for 3G, and it's limited to 4G. If you put the 4G radios at the other end, it could never be used for 5G because of the nature of the antennas in 5G are much different. And there's a lot of different nodes, which I'll go over, that are below tree canopy level, which especially with conifers like pines, it really does diminish the signal dramatically to close into the site. And each of these has power cabinet with fiber and electrical power at the base, so that's already in place. And really the evaluation centered around how can we make these work better, without having to put all this other stuff in the street or put too many other things in the system. So next slide. So this is I name it DAS Node 2 because these are all the nodes that are within Cherry Hill city limits. This system actually expands beyond Cherry Hills to other surrounding communities, but we were just focused on these 13 that are currently in Cherry Hills. And what in this particular picture, I snapped a picture of it, and I wanted to illustrate, with the existing 30-foot pole, by putting a 40-foot or a 50-foot in, what it would look like, and getting those antennas up above the tree line would have a dramatic impact. And just this little elevation of these antennas can really make a big difference. And you can't quite see it, but behind that little arrow, it looks like a Department of Transportation radio where they've dropped in a 40-foot pole to put their antenna on top to really clear all the tree lines. So the radio frequency doesn't discriminate. It's poor anytime you have it surrounded by trees. Next slide. Here's the Node 7, and this one is a slightly different type that was put in many years ago. It's a galvanized steel with what we affectionately call a cantenna. And that cantenna has all the antennas inside of it, and the radios are at the base. And as you can see, this one suffers from the same thing. The trees grew taller than the pole itself, so it's probably gradually suffered over the years that these trees have been growing.
Andrew, can I ask one quick question about this slide before you go on?
Certainly.
Do you see how the 30-foot line is drawn to the bottom of the can? Is that is it 30 feet and then the can's on top of that? Or was it 30 feet to the top of the whole thing?
It's 30 feet to just the pole itself.
Okay.
And I wanted to illustrate that, the can is sitting on top of the 30-foot pole, but in order to illustrate, what a 40-foot would look like, that would also have a can on top, or the 50-foot as well. So it was really to illustrate where the can is in relation to the trees surrounding it, and why the performance would be affected by that tree clutter in the area.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to be clear whether those 40 and 50-foot picture, it would actually have something on top of that.
Mayor, can I ask a follow-up?
I wanted to compare the poles to the poles. So
Yeah. Okay. And yes, Councilor Heller, you
I'll
had a
follow up.
question.
Just from the, can you go back to the prior slide with the older antenna? Maybe one more. It was where the antenna was actually, right there. So I just want to understand, make sure I'm right about this. Very similar to the mayor's question. If these are mounted at about 20 foot, can you go to the top of a 40-foot pole? If you used a buddy
difficulty
pole?
with doing that is the electrical space. So the powers that have electrical power lines running along them.
No, I get that, but could you use a buddy pole? Because the point I'm trying to make is if you go from 20 to 40 feet, used a parallel or a buddy pole, you're actually doubling the height by only going to a 40-foot pole. Am I making sense?
Yes, as far as putting a second pole in there alongside that pole or tying it to it, yes, that can definitely be done. It doesn't have to necessarily replace it.
And so by only going 10 feet higher pole, you're doubling the height of the antenna.
Well, I think when we get to some of the other photos, though, I think you'll see maybe one of the challenges with that. Councilor Robinson, did you have a
Yeah,
question?
Andrew, thank you for this. So my question is, what did we see the pictures of the existing antennas. Are the new antennas they would be put in place, are they similar in appearance, or how would they be different from?
They're much better looking and not sticking out like these particular ones. A lot of them are conformal, or you can use the canisters, which actually hide the entire antenna and radios. So it makes it for a cleaner installation, because there's been a lot of development in aesthetics over the last 10 to 15 years. So it can be much better looking than the previous ones. And the great thing about the like, for instance, the galvanized poles or other types of hollow structures is all the cabling can go inside there, so you don't see all the cabling hanging outside on the wooden pole. But there are conduits and other things that can be put on the wooden pole to cover that. Just that we're just looking at all the different options for aesthetics.
That was a question that I was curious about, because on the existing poles, all the carriers are on there, and you can see all the antennas, and it's sticking out pretty far. With those canisters, all the carriers could be inside that one canister? It looks too small to me.
Yes, at least two of the carriers can go into that pole, and then you could stack another canister on top of it.
Top of that,
and
okay.
another one.
All right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Okay, now here's a very difficult example of 20-foot being heavily surrounded by the trees, and of course conifers are notorious for canceling, especially 800 megahertz lower band signals, because they're similar to the pine needles in length to the quarter wave it sounds technical, but it actually just cancels the signal, and that's a problem, especially in areas that have huge eastern pine and conifer type trees in the area, and this is completely surrounded by it. So I doubt this provides any coverage other than the road just in front of it, but it's just an interesting study. And looking at 10 or 15 years later, did that tree growth grow from 20 to its current height, or was the engineer just asleep at the wheel and decided to put it inside the tree line? So it's a very interesting thing. This would never be done by professional engineers nowadays, but it's something that explains why the signal doesn't get out anywhere. Here's one that's not only has two advantages, it has, and this was the example I used, but this, even though it has a small cluster of trees, but it's also on high ground, if you look at the way the terrain falls away. So this particular one isn't directly affected by the clutter, but it could really use the help of some additional height. And all of these nodes don't have to be the same height necessarily. It all depends on the tree clutter. But changing the antennas from those old low gain antennas to a newer, more modern high gain antenna makes all the difference. Really, really gets the signal, so it cuts through any tree clutter and blockage and gets more of the signal out to where it needs to be. Here, this is another one of the CAN type antennas, and again, the trees are taller than it, so it suffers also from some attenuation in the area. But aesthetically, these especially with some of the newer type cans and things like that, they look really, really good. They can be colored different elements. Next slide. Here's one that's a taller pole itself, to accommodate the lines and the guidelines above. But again, the antennas are still within the trees, so it makes it very difficult for this to cover anything other than the immediate road area. And there's another one, the Node 9, and this is right beneath the trees with clusters of conifers behind it. It's another difficult one, to provide wide area coverage with. So potential options, that we've looked at is the original owner of these DAS nodes is Crown Castle, which is a tower company, and if you can utilize anything that they have, because most of this stuff can be reused, the fiber, the power, all these other elements. It's really just a matter of, increasing the pole height to get over the trees and to basically connect to newer radios, newer antennas. It'll have a lot more power and throw, from the distance. The benefits of replacing the ones at these nodes versus putting all new ones in, because they're in the right of way, they basically just get administratively processed because it's Department of Transportation land. And there's also an FCC preemption that allows for these, to be put in rights of way. So it makes it much simpler to get these things in place. And the small cell definition of the FCC is just having up to 28 square feet of equipment, that can go in an area. And also with Cherry Hills itself, small cells are defined as at a height of 50 feet or less. So it just makes it a much simpler process to get these changed and upgraded to improve the service.
So just a question, yeah. So when you say it's just a matter of increasing the height, do you anticipate, I would anticipate that it's all new poles though, right? It would not be using any of the existing poles or infrastructure that are there. It would be maybe the same location. Could it be different locations? I guess those are two different questions for you.
I mean, it could be, and it could be along the same fiber right of way, so you'd get the power in the fiber. It'd become more expensive if you put all new poles that require additional fiber to be buried. But, it could be in the immediate vicinity of it, or it could be actually tied right behind it and attached to the existing pole. So, you don't have to, upset the power, by replacing the existing pole. But there's just many options. They're all the options we're looking at are direct bury, so there's no big foundations that need to be poured or any major construction. But and that's something, in this particular study, we didn't explore the construction and the additional costs or anything like that. We just looked at a practical solution with existing architecture.
Yep, Councilor Heller?
Just a question about resiliency.
Another question.
Yeah, on resiliency, I think on larger cell sites, you may end up with battery plant or a propane generator if the commercial power goes out. How do these small cells work? Do they have any resiliency built in, or if the commercial power is out, the cell tower is out, the antenna's out?
It really depends on the overlap of other signal. If, for instance, there's signal in a particular area that's strong enough to survive a small, like losing of one tower, say if a car hits it, one of the poles, and it could be repaired within 24 hours, then there's no backup power for it, because once the pole is hit, the antennas are typically on the ground, so they don't, it's not necessary to back that up. But in a lot of different areas, there is a battery backup if it's critical architecture. If it's in a major city, like in Denver, for instance, where they have these types of poles in quite dense areas, it makes sense to have some sort of backup to keep them in place while they're repairing a fiber cut or something like that. In this particular case, there's no battery backup in these. This is really, to shore up the existing coverage that can get into the Cherry Hills area. So this wouldn't have any batteries. This wouldn't have anything other than power to the radios and then the antennas themselves.
So for these to meet the FCC requirement, if they did have battery backup as a small cell, they would still have to be within that 28 square feet.
Yes.
So.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if I may, actually, I'm going to just build on what Director Goldie's referring to highlight something that Andrew talked about, just so it's very clear for council members. You're going to see a map in just a moment where all these nodes are located. And sneak preview, spoiler alert, they're all going to be in right-of-way. And the reason that this height matters is because it can fit within this 28 square feet requirement that the FCC has. If it's in the right-of-way, it has this size requirement. It basically follows a FCC process with shot clocks is what they're called, which limits the amount of time that we have to review. In essence, it preempts a public hearing process. So on one hand, some folks may call that a benefit. On another hand, other folks may call that a bug, right? Not a feature. So I'm highlighting that just so, because we aren't here really to advocate for one side or the other. We're wanting to give you both sides of all of these issues so that you can determine if you want to go forward. The interesting thing about that fact, though, is that theoretically, what you're going to see on this map and these height improvements to 40 feet or 50 feet on these towers or these poles that are already there, an application could theoretically come in tomorrow for the exact same thing without us lifting a finger. Now, it hasn't, but this is a possibility no matter what.
And I appreciate your comment. I had made that note in my comments as well, that it said that the benefit generally to the people building the towers is that it's easier to get them installed. And basically that's saying you don't have to get public hearings, you don't have
Right.
to get city approval. I don't see that as a benefit necessarily, but the reality is, as has been part of previous discussions, companies can come in and put these towers up to 50 feet anywhere in the right of way today. They could put it in your front yard
That's right.
today.
I think
And we could say nothing about
I
it.
think that's important. I mean, I agree with you. It's not a benefit. It's a benefit to them, but the point is it's a reality. And by the way, it's an indication of preemption, whether that's federal preemption on the state or municipalities, state preemption on local governments. Preemption is preemption. They have the right to do it, and there's not a lot that the next level down of government can do. That's an important point.
Okay.
So so I just wanted to clarify that. Andrew, you might just pick up where you left off. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. That was a very, very good back and forth. So the next slide, please. Okay, so here's a map of all the nodes that actually sit within Cherry Hills. This is part of the overall system. I think there's 75 altogether that cross into all the surrounding communities. So these specific ones address specific spots where all the carrier towers and rooftops that they have surrounding Cherry Hills just can't quite penetrate into to get the service in there. So this is the distribution of them, and you can see they're all in the right of ways and in different areas. This was done again. I think it was 2012. So it's about 13 years ago. Next slide. So the potential options we've been asked to explore is trying to utilize these existing properties since they're already there. They're already being paid for by each of the carriers. They pay a monthly rent to utilize the system, and everything's in place. So it's saves a lot of digging and a lot of time, to reutilize these structures. I mean, the pros are, the coverage increase is definitely noticeable, and a lot of people now who can't get signal are going to have signal, and the lower costs, of course, of developing a new greenfield project versus just upgrading an existing one, and the existing fiber and power make that significantly easier because that's the most difficult and costly component of doing these types of systems. The cons, of course, are anything that gets touched and changes it, you'll get potential opposition from residents, and then there's just a few areas that don't benefit. There's actually two areas that don't benefit because they don't have one of these nodes near it, and that's the far south west quadrant of the city and an area just on the southern side of it, and that's primarily because there are no towers in the next city over in order to fill those little gaps, but if they ever needed it in the future, 2 more poles can be added to do that. But that's essentially the pros and cons that you're faced with now. Next slide. This is when we're looking at the RF maps that I provided. This is kind of like a guide for the signal strength, and of course, red is good, as in hot, a good signal, and of course, the blue is the cold, as in bad signal. But if you see red, it's not a bad thing; it's a good thing. But typically what you're trying to do is get it between the good and fair, the 85 and 95, which is kind of the green and the greenish blue. So with that, go to the next slide, please. Now, this is the current coverage at 20 feet. And as you can see, there's green, and I included all of the cell towers and rooftops that are currently in Cherry Hills, on the churches up in the north area there. And there are a couple of 45-foot flagpoles, in and around the city center and over at the school. But you can see the main area are for the golf course right down to the southern area, very weak coverage. And there's a couple other spots, throughout the area that, just can't be gotten to by these existing nodes. Now, if we go to the next slide, this shows a 40-foot, which is a mild improvement to the 30, but they're still having difficulty overcoming the tree line, and just getting at or just above the tree line is the goal. And because you have such beautiful trees in Cherry Hills, they're quite tall and quite a wide variety of them. And there's still a bit of a signal. It's minorly improved, but as we go to the next one with the 50-foot, I mean, it really does improve dramatically. So it gives you, pretty much in the lower southwest corner and the center, you've got strong coverage in most of the other areas. So it's something that can be done with existing infrastructure. If you really wanted it perfect, then a couple other poles added to the southwest and the southern portion would make it above 90% good coverage for voice, for texting, as well as internet data. And next slide, please. Okay, so here's just another view of the comparison of with the same, using the same color code. You can see the 20 versus the 40. You can see how it improves that the left-hand channel right across the city, and with much better signal. And then the 20 to the 50, almost completely cuts it up and leaves just two spots that are, and the actual signal levels in those two spots are in the kind of like cross between the light blue and the dark blue. So you can still make calls and receive calls in those areas. It's just if you duck behind a building or in a cluster of trees, you may not hold on to that call. And next slide, please. And here's the numbers actually that show the signal level with the three different options. The existing, which is the lowest bar in the right on the graph, the 40-foot, which is the middle bar, and then the 50-foot, which is the highest bar. And the target signal, wireless carrier is always looking for that -85, which I deemed pretty good signal. But you could see the greatest improvement from 20 to 40 to 50 at that -85 level, which is kind of like, that's exactly where you want to be, because that distribution of the signal is always going to work, on your phones and devices, as you get better, and the first set of data is the surface area. Cherry Hills is about 6.3 square miles. You're currently covering about 3.7 square miles with that pretty good coverage. The 40-foot would put you at 4.6 square miles, and then the 50 would put you at 5.1. So it gives you, significant increase in coverage. The lower graph is actually the percentage of the area of Cherry Hills. And right now you're sitting at about 58.8%, with that pretty good. And with the 40-foot improves to 74%, and then up to 81%. It's not 100%, but it's 81%. But even if you look at the -90, the good or the fair, it pushes you up to about 93 or up to 98%. So you're going to have serviceable signal throughout the entire city. And the only areas where it's poor is just areas that you can't get that signal into because of the distance of the node or the distance from another cell site.
Mayor, I have a question.
Sure, Councilor Robinson.
Thank you, Andrew. Can you just give us a little more detail as to how you came up with these numbers? I'm just looking for a little more, knowledge about the veracity of them and so on. So how did you come up with these numbers?
Well, these numbers are generated in the software RF propagation tool that I use to create the plots, the map plots. So I can actually put a cursor in and calculate the signal level throughout all of the different areas within there. And this actually takes those colors and translates them into numbers. So with that way, so it's very accurate. And the model I built with the clutter into it, I actually adjusted the model to fit the way that the tree clutter is actually distributed throughout your city. So it gives you a good, accurate picture of what the signal is. And this is just the number of translations that come from the software itself. So yeah, I didn't make them up or anything. These are definitely from the software.
I wasn't accusing you of that.
As far as the signal level. I also have other software that measures crowdsourced data from all the residents of Cherry Hills on their phones as far as what signal level they're reporting throughout the area. So this matches up very closely with actual users in Cherry Hills as far as what their experience is with the existing signal level, whereas how much more improvement it can get with stronger equipment, higher gain antennas, and better radios.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Please continue.
Okay, next slide, please. One of the other things that has come up in discussions, and something I follow very closely, is, well, why can't satellite just cover everything? And who needs cell towers? Who needs poles? Who needs any of that stuff? And well, one of the important distinctions is that the satellites, they're 500 feet above us, in the low Earth orbit, but they still use the same frequency. In the case of SpaceX, as well as the new AST satellite constellations that are being launched, they're using the same cellular licenses and frequencies to cover from 500 miles above us. And they run into the same problem. As soon as they hit tree clutter, or if they're hitting at an angle, the 15-mile spot that covers that part of the Earth, wherever you are, you can be affected by the same types of clutter, whether it be trees. If you're in open areas, no problem at all. But also, these things are not built for capacity. They're built just to give you that lifeline link when you're in a very rural area. So, once you get into a area like Cherry Hills or Denver or anywhere like that, because the phones automatically would get onto it or not, they'll be allowed on it. But if you get too many people on at the same time, the service just diminishes to nothing because it can't support that many users from a satellite. So it's a compliment, a great compliment for helping fill in those gaps, whether they be in the mountains or whether they be in areas where there's just no infrastructure. But it can't support the amount of end users in highly dense areas. So it's wonderful. It actually works well, where you can get it and where they've launched it so far, like SpaceX. But the direct-to-device technology is not the same as the satellite dish that you put on your roof or put on your RV. It's a completely different frequency band. It's using actual terrestrial-based signals that are actually licensed. And what happens is the wireless carriers, whether it be T-Mobile, Verizon, or AT&T, have donated a small sliver of their spectrum for the satellite companies to use. But that's not enough spectrum to support even tens of users. It's really for ultimate rural phone calls, texting, things like that. And it may improve over the next 10, 15 years, but right now the timeline of their launching of these constellations, as well as what the current technology is in order to support capacity, is just not there yet. And the next slide, I explain all that, what I just said in text, a summary here. So if you want a copy of it to see what it is, it's just and I love satellites. I think they're a great thing to help out at sea or out at areas you can't do infrastructure. But I always try to set the expectation that it's a complementary, and it won't ever take over the need for the high capacity sites on the terrestrial network.
Mayor, I have a
Yes,
question on
Councilor
that.
Robinson.
Yeah, so because I've heard from others that, it's just, 3 years away and we'll have satellite technology available in urban areas. What I'm hearing from you, Andrew, is that you don't believe that it is significantly longer for satellite to be a solution for us.
It would, yeah, and exactly because of your positioning too, because you're so close to a city like Denver. If they allow full call initiation from the Denver and its suburbs, that satellite would be overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. And I've done capacity planning and frequency planning, and I know exactly how much capacity a certain amount of megahertz will give you, and unless more frequency bands are given to the satellites, which doesn't look like they're going to outbid the current big three or big four MNOs out there. It's very difficult to do without having dedicated spectrum for it. So that's really the thing holding it back. I think the technology if given enough spectrum, it could do it. That the spectrum is the most valuable asset every carrier has, and they spend billions for it. So it's sometimes it's an uphill battle to really get new tech going because of that that high price tag for the spectrum.
Yeah, and it's not just the 3 commercials. My company, as an example, and every utility in the country has bought spectrum for proprietary LTE systems that takes spectrum away from the commercial markets. So there's a lot of competition for spectrum.
Oh, there is, yeah, and then the FCC isn't exactly releasing it fast, So there are other things that have to be. Sometimes you have to sacrifice things in order to make something else work more beneficially. So, and having been in the thick of that for more than 30, well, almost 40 years now, it's always the promise is much sweeter than the delivery, and it always turns out that way. Unfortunately, I'd love to have the optimistic view that everything we'll have flying cars tomorrow, which is pretty close, but having all these different futuristic things just seem to be just out of reach, and you hope for it sooner, but typically it's later.
Councilor Ebert, did you have?
Andrew, if you could,
Next
thank
slide.
you. Before you jump, Andrew, if you would. When these 20-foot units were put on those existing spots, do we know why they chose 20 foot at that time? And the reason I ask is that, was it just thinking that trees at that point were only 15, or that we only needed, because where I'm going on this is, you can say, okay, if it's at 50 feet, well, we have many places in the city, especially in the right-of-ways, where we have trees that might be at or near 40 feet or 50 feet even already, and they're going to grow. And if these are going to continue, I think you're telling me that satellites aren't going to cover this for the immediate future. Well, our trees are going to continue to grow. Is this going to diminish the effectiveness of something that we would do at either the 40 or 50 foot level, if that were the case? And then secondly, I'm assuming what I'm hearing is that while none of these have 5G technology on them right now, 5G technology could go on all of these to be used as well. Is that right?
Yeah, they couldn't go on the current hardware that's there now because the way the antennas are, they're just single beam, very old fashioned dipole antennas, and they can't support the elements that 5G uses, which is multi-beam, beamforming, all these different techniques that allow it to get through clutter that the current antennas can't get through because they don't boost the signal enough. Originally when these were designed, there's 2 reasons why they would have put it at 20 feet. The primary reason is just utility regulation. The electrical company can't have these antennas, any closer than, typically 5 to somehow even make the rule 10 feet, because that transmission can arc and jump through the antenna, because that's what an antenna is. It's an amplifier, and all electricity is a signal that's in the lower 660 hertz range, but it would still be affected by that. So that distance from the power lines is what drove them to that 20-foot level. I not being familiar with Cherry Hills back in 2012, they would have typically a good RF engineer accounts for tree growth for several years. The other benefit of going just above the tree lines, even if the tree is 50 feet and you're at 50 feet, the upper part of the tree tends to have much less density than the center part. So you have it's much easier for the signal to get through and cresting the tops of the trees just because it doesn't have such high density. So you have quite a few years of usefulness out of these if they were upgraded to 5G. But plus, because of the 5G capabilities and techniques, not only does it have a higher amplification of the signals going out, transmitting out to the customers, but it has the gain so that the signal from these little tiny handheld phones, which are 600 milliwatts, less than a watt, now have that gain both directions. So now you can pick up that cell phone that's inside of a house versus now you can only probably pick it up outdoors. So it enhances the overall link, the radio link. So it gives you much better performance across the board. Because if you design these things, 100 feet above the trees, then of course it'll be always, you'd be able to get direct line of sight. But this is that happy medium where, okay, if you just get to the top of the trees and get that signal coming back from the cell and the signal going out to the cell, you can have a robust system.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things.
Well, and I don't know, how much more of the presentation do we have? I do want to get through.
Because I do
Are we-
want to.
I think we're getting
I
close.
think it's
Okay.
next steps, and I'd probably give that to Chris.
Yeah, let me just, because this is a good point to kick off the conversation,
Yes,
the council discussion. So just to set the table for council, again, we are not asking council to take steps forward or to reconsider the 100-foot tower proposal, mostly because council isn't directing us to go down that road right now. What we are asking council is, knowing what you saw on the coverage maps and the potential improvements to the coverage, while it would not obviously cover the whole city, which was one of the 4 criteria that council had established, I guess the real question for council is it enough of an improvement that it would warrant us initiating conversations with the Crown Castle or their subsequent entity that owns those now to explore it with that entity? And again, there's nothing stopping them from coming in now, right? They could do that now, but it's unclear to us, if they're fully aware of these kinds of options. And so the real question for council is there enough of a benefit to cell phone users in Cherry Hills Village and its residents that warrants us to basically initiate a conversation with Crown Castle? Or is there not enough of a benefit, maybe because it doesn't reach the whole city, that it's not worth having those continued conversations? If we have those conversations, I just want to be very clear. We are not saying that we are not asking you to give us a green light to make deals, to arrange it. We would explore and report back to you what we hear from them. We are not asking for you to cut a deal.
Councilor Robinson.
Yes, thank you. Chris, can you just give us a little more detail on that process, the next step? Who's going to be having those conversations? How long do you think it's going to take? Then will you be reporting back?
Yes.
To us? And
Good question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the cost.
So right now, the cost is nothing, right? We don't know what the cost would
Well, I
be.
mean, staff time, but there's other
We do have a consultant,
consultants.
yes, who we would basically end up paying on a additional basis, a few $1,000s probably, right? They may not need to be at all the meetings though, right? We would try and be judicious with that. But in essence, we developed a small technical working group, including our own consultants and somebody who works in the industry who happens to be a Cherry Hills Village resident. And we have been exploring this idea. It would be that group who would reach out and have these conversations. And there has already been an initial sort of offline informal conversation about, hey, just so you know, this is all going on. And there was an initial, oh, well, interesting. If that goes anywhere, reach out to us and we'd like to set something up to have a conversation. So I think there is an openness to at least having a conversation. What it looks like, who knows? I really don't know. That would be the purpose of us reaching out to them. How long would that take? I don't, it's a little difficult for me to say, and I'm gonna look at Jay a little bit, only because I don't know how many meetings would be involved, mostly because I think that would be dictated by them on what they want to tell us, right? How involved would this be? Are they looking for, what are they looking for from us? Well, they could do this today without us, so to speak. What would we do to help that out? The answers to those kinds of questions would probably dictate how long it would be until we get back to you, but I would hope no more than a couple months. Is that fair? I can't promise that, but that would be my hope.
Timeline's going to be hard because we don't know what the providers are doing behind the scenes and
If they wanted to, if they wanted
their budgets and so.
if the Crown Castle or their eventual organization said to us, well, we would want to find out from the carriers if they would be willing to do this effort because of the increased costs for installation and all those kinds of things, That could end up taking a while, right? Getting that kind of answer from all the carriers could drag this out. We're just not sure.
Right. Okay, because that would involve potentially Crown Castle making a commitment to at least at a minimum, replace 13 poles. And then all the carriers would have to replace their equipment on those 13 poles. And so we'd have to find out the willingness of any of those people to do that, which is ultimately the question of, is the coverage improvement enough to pursue that effort? I think that's why staff has come back at this point with that. So along those lines, Councilor Ebert?
Following that question, though, of the trade-off is, I guess we talked before about the economic model that would go with the 100-foot towers, and I just want to be very clear what the economic model is, that if you're talking to Crown Castle and talking to the different carriers, do we have a semblance of if this is something that they do as part of their regular, I mean, they already have a number of places in the village to run this and we're not paying a cent for it. And similarly, they could come in tomorrow and do it and we wouldn't pay a cent for it. But if we're trying to encourage this, I'd like to try and understand, at least even before we go forward with the discussion of whether to go forward, a little better understanding of if this is likely to have some type of a city expense associated with it, or if this is something that when they go out and, we had talked before on the 100-foot towers that we would get land lease type of payments in exchange for not having to do all the maintenance and everything on the tower. Now, here we're giving up part of our rights of way for something like this, but, is there a cost? And then similarly, many of our people that are in the audience today were here for the discussions previously, and one of the discussions that we talked an awful lot about was, or what was raised, I shouldn't say we talked about it, but it was raised, was potential health concerns. And similarly, I don't know if we're moving to 5G, if that, and perhaps our consultant Andrew can tell us a little bit more about that, but is something like this associated with even an argument of health risks versus, I know we're preempted on it, but I just would like to know what the science is saying.
Sure. Let me just first, and I will have Andrew help answer that second question. As far as could there be some sort of cost associated with this process? I genuinely don't know. In the right of way, it could be that they say, oh, we just didn't realize, thanks for bringing this to our attention. We think we can make this work with these providers, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe there'd be no cost. Maybe they say, and I'm making this up, we haven't talked to them yet, right? So I'm just trying to give council ideas about what could happen. Part of the reason we haven't done it so far in Cherry Hills Village is the rate of return for this is not high enough because the density is so low. I know council heard all about this dynamic through the process. So they say, look, our rate of return is, our minimum that we require to do this is X, yours comes in at Y. For us to do this, you would have to make up that delta, the difference between those two numbers. We have no, I would hesitate to even throw out a number because I have no idea.
Well, I think that's the whole point, which is we don't know at this point in time. What we know is that this has some improvement, but it doesn't meet the criteria that the council originally set out, which was a comprehensive solution for the entire village, which is where, and we derive the point of saying we're willing to commit resources of the city for a comprehensive solution. We don't know what the cost might be for something along these lines. Could be zero, could be right up to here. Just speaking for myself, I know if it was way over here, it's the same as it would be for the others. I'm going to have a very different opinion than if they came in and said, we're ready to do it and we're not going to charge you a dime. I mean, because they could do it anyway. I mean, right. So the point is, but you don't know yet. You've got to get that information to find out what is possible and what is the circumstances. And then again, council would weigh in, and again, everybody would have a different view about where you are on that continuum.
And I think you also have to quantify the benefit. You really need to do a benefit cost analysis here, and you can't do that without the cost.
Right.
And without more meat on the bones around the benefit.
Well, and I
Exactly.
think, I think, agreed that we really don't know the answer to that cost question. My instinct says that because it hasn't been done in the last 12 years, it's not zero. I don't know what the rest of it is, but if we really wanted to incentivize some movement, my guess is that it's not zero. But I have no idea what number above zero that would be.
Well, and I guess though, which again, I've already said, hey, the more you move towards us incentivizing for a non-comprehensive solution, I'm less inclined to go that route. But I don't feel the least bit reluctant to sit back and go, hey, spend a little time, waste a little Crown Castle's time to sit back and, because I can always say, no, I ain't doing it. I mean, get the information so we know kind of where we are at the end of the day, and then we can come back and assess. And as Councilor Heller said, I mean, a cost-benefit analysis, which, and again, it's kind of it's almost like a Kentucky windage thing. It's like, hey, we're going to do these kinds of resources and we're getting a lot more green over here. Somebody, probably Andrew, can do a better job than that. But that's what we'd be looking at the end of the day. And then you'd be coming back, as the council would need to do at that time, and come back and alter its criteria in terms of an expenditure of city resources. But right now, we got to find out what are the resources that might be necessary, and there might not be any.
Very well put. And I would just say that's actually, again, as a staff, we did not want to be presumptuous about what council had laid out criteria. And here we are presenting you an option that doesn't meet the criteria. Are we dense? Do we not understand what direction you've given us? What are we doing here? That's why we're here. We're recognizing that what the option we're giving you is not meeting the criteria, but is it enough that it warrants us having these conversations to find out the cost? That's really.
But I think the other thing is, it's not just, you were dense, you didn't know the criteria. The point is when we had that long discussion, and we heard a lot of discussion from our residents, that there was concern that there were alternatives other than what was being presented at that time. And I know most of us felt at that time saying, hey, it is really, really critical that we run the string out on that. We can't sit there and look at one alternative and say there aren't any others, if in fact there are others, and that's what requires us to do that at the end of the day. And I think, I know speaking for myself, I felt very strongly about that, and that was why I thought that was a worthy endeavor. And I think that this next step is a worthy endeavor to find out if there's anything there.
I do want to circle back to the health questions that Rob raised, and I think that maybe Andrew, maybe you're the best person for that. And is there a difference between the emissions from a 100-foot tower and the antennas there versus the 50-foot towers or 40-foot or what we have now?
Well, I'm not a doctor or a medical guy, but I just have a lot of experience with these different things. And you've been sitting in the same exact RF, for probably the last 13 years. And this is going to be, no difference in actual the signals are all the same. The frequency bands are the same. So it's not going to increase exposure or it's not going to do anything different that you've been living with for this amount of time. So, from just that perspective, I can tell you that that's not going to change. Even some of the newer 5G frequencies, like in the 3.5 gigahertz band, they're much weaker and don't travel as far as the lower band, 800 megahertz. So they're even less of a threat, because they dissipate when they hit any object, whether it's a tree or anything that's in the way. So. And from my experience, I've been around RF and these types of antennas for most of my life, and I've never seen any effects myself, my own personal opinion, from this type of radio signal, because we're surrounded by it every day. It's all non-ionizing radio signals, and we have it in baby monitors, we have it from the sun, we have it from broadcast TV, our microwaves we make our popcorn in. And it's passing through us, cosmic radiation, constantly every minute of every day. So I haven't seen any increase, in my health issues and things like that.
Andrew,
So it's from my opinion, I don't think it poses any risks. But again, I'm not a medical a scientist or a medical person.
Andrew, one thing we have heard is that the FCC has safety standards as it relates to these towers, and I think obviously all these towers would have to meet those standards. But I think I've heard you mention that the FCC considers the taller the tower, the less exposure to people at ground level. Is that correct?
Well, yes. When you put 100 or 50 feet between you and the transmitters, it does put a lower signal. The FCC measurement is made based on the worst case. So typically, like on rooftops, you can't get any closer than 10 feet to an antenna. So if you have it even on a 20 or 30 foot pole, you're still within the safe range if you're standing on the ground underneath of it, which is 3 millivolts per meter, and it's and that standard was derived from how close can the public get to it, how close can workers get to it, and it's funny too because we put the cell phones typically up against our ears, and you're getting more exposure from your cell phone by running it next to your ear anyway. It's just that it's non-ionizing and it's a low power source, so it doesn't typically have any effect other than slight warming of the water in your body, but it has no detrimental effects like gamma radiation and other things like that. So anybody who's ever used a cell phone for any amount of time, if it hasn't affected you all your life or how much now, it's not gonna change in the near future.
So I actually, could we go back to the slide that has the picture of node 5, either node 5 or node 9? So my question is, and I totally get the interference with the power lines. I've had my own battles with Excel and trees and power lines, and so I understand why they were mounted where they are. My question is, so if you look down on the ground, you see that little bit of right-of-way there. If we were to put in, and this is, I'm assuming, a 30-foot pole, if we were to put in a 50-foot pole, where would we put that doesn't interfere with the power lines?
Because on the ground, the edge of road
Anything
is
would
right
be
there,
in line
and the
with the
fence is
power
right
lines.
there. So there's almost no other option but to go up through where those power
Right.
lines are aligned. Is that what you're?
Right. So I don't know, is it replacing the power pole with a taller pole and the power lines attached to the taller pole? Or is it, I don't know, how does that work?
It would, I've typically seen it's an auxiliary pole that's put in right next to that or behind it. And the pole will extend above that pole, so it'll have enough safe clearance distance from power lines, that you can mount the antenna above that rather than, near the same level. So it's really critical part of the utility question is to keep them at least a minimum distance based on what the local utility sets.
Well, and I get the vertical distance. My question is more about the horizontal distance. I mean, there's really nowhere to move the pole forward or back. Can you put a taller pole up through those power lines?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You can,
Because
okay.
the pole is insulated. It won't, it's not a matter of having the pole itself close to the power lines. It's more the antennas. Keeping that antenna distance away from them is the critical piece. And I've actually seen installations where you have a pole, they'll just put another longer pole, they'll bolt it to the existing pole, and then it just extends above the area where the power lines run. So you maintain that distance from the power lines for the antennas specifically.
Okay, that was my question, because I absolutely understand the height issues.
Mayor?
Yeah.
But
Councilor
if
Ebert.
that is the case, that if this is a 30-foot pole, let's say it means that you can't put a 30-foot pole with the new system on it, because then it's right at the power lines.
Right. It's got
So
to
you
be,
got to either go 40 or 50, and is 40 enough of a separation, Or does that by definition command you then to go to the 50-foot
I think
in
Andrew
order
was
to
saying
have that
10 feet.
separation?
Yeah, it's in the National Electric Safety
Yeah.
Code. It's
I think
very
it's
well
10
laid
feet.
out.
Yeah, and 40 gives you the distance, but also at the top of the pole, those look like messenger lines. Either it's either grounding or just support cables versus power cables. So that those aren't probably transmission. I wouldn't know, but I'd have to check. But they don't look like transmission. They look like the messenger lines that keep the pole, keep tension on the pole so it doesn't twist or turn in any direction. So I mean that wouldn't be something that has to be a distance need to be maintained. But I've seen anywhere in different jurisdictions, 5 feet to 10 feet is typically the distance, so you don't get any problems with arcing with electrical power lines.
I had a question.
Yes, Counselor McGuire.
Regarding what's going to happen in phase 2, assuming we go forward. I guess I would also like you, if you go back to, I think it was slide 19, Laura. This one. So if you look at the difference between existing 20 and then 40 or 50-foot poles, certainly in the southwest area, and then south central there, I don't know if that's right around where Glenmore is or if it's a little east of Glenmore. And I think what the consultant said was there's not many of those existing poles in those two areas, certainly not on the southwest corner. Could you explore what would be involved in getting perhaps a few more poles put in those areas so that we would have better coverage there? Is that something that's possible?
We certainly could include that in our conversations with them. But if you think back to the pros and cons list, that would involve a substantially higher cost because we'd suddenly have to run power and fiber to whatever new sites there are.
I think
But the short answer to your question is, of course, we absolutely couldn't do that.
because I think, when we talked about, the 100-foot pole issue, and one of the reasons why that was considered a possible solution was because it met these criteria. And one of the criteria was we don't want to spend any money. But I think we need to look at what would it cost us to get better coverage if we do spend money. And so I think we do need to get that information.
Sure.
We then can maybe decide, no, we don't want to spend that money.
Andrew, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
So if we just look at the 40-foot, on this slide specifically, the 40-foot map, and we have
Hey,
the,
can I just interrupt? That wasn't the criteria. I want to make sure it's clear. It wasn't that we wouldn't spend any money. It's that we wouldn't go to the taxpayers for a tax increase.
Fair enough.
Okay, the point is that the city would have the ability to be able to fund in and of itself, and that was the deal, and we talked about that. And then staff did such a great job, they actually were able to go saying, hey, we're not going to have to spend any money, possibly, which is great.
Fair.
But the point is, the thing still stood there that the city was willing to look at that. But I think that goes to your point, which is,
Yes.
yeah, we're
But
still
I'm
willing to
saying,
spend some
what will
dough.
it cost us to get?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So Andrew, on the 40-foot map on this slide, there's the two big areas that everyone's mentioned here so far, near Glenmore and the southwest corner of the city. But there are still little pockets where if you got blocked by a tree for a moment, if you went and there was a building or something like that, you still may drop a call in some of those other lighter shaded areas that are not one of the two that we've mentioned.
I call it the river. There's a river of blue that runs
Yeah,
kind of east-west across the top there.
There's parkland along there.
well, obviously, if you look
There
at
are some-
if you look at the 50-foot map, right? The Cherry Hills Country Club has basically a little mini pocket, if you will.
Right, yeah.
So yes, there's little spots like that. But I want to make sure that, and I really don't. I'm not trying to lead him. I really want to make sure that we understand, even if we went with a 40 or 50-foot map, there still may be calls of like, wait a second, what are we doing? I thought we improved all this. Why are my calls still getting dropped? That still may happen occasionally. Is that correct, Andrew?
It may. It's more unlikely because those
Sure.
areas of blue, you still see blue in. They're very transitional. So instead of being worse than what I would call bad, which is minus.
Can you get closer to the microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's right.
Sorry. Let me make sure my.
Oh, wait, hold on.
It's just that in those particular areas, if you're moving, the phone is constantly updating signal between it and the system, so it'll wait. Especially if it's encountering a couple weak areas, and it'll wait. It won't drop the call. It'll just hang on to it. And some of you have probably experienced that warbling. As you're getting in a weak signal area, and you hear the woo, and it starts sounding funny. But it hangs on, and then all of a sudden the signal gets better. Those particular, in both the 40-foot and 50-foot example, in my tool, I can put my cursor over it and then get the signal measurement for every single bin that's in that area. And in most of those, it would be transitional, that you drop a little bit, then you get into better signal. So the likelihood of you dropping calls in those areas is far less likely than, say, the southwest quadrant, where in the center of that southwest quadrant, there's just a few spots where the signal drops below, where if you stand still for more than a certain amount of time, the call will just say, oh, forget about it. I'm not going to carry on with this. But when I went over this, I mentioned that, an additional pole, what's interesting is it could be an additional pole in the next jurisdiction over, because they have just as many of these nodes as you do. So you never know. It depends. If they cut a deal with all your surrounding jurisdictions, you may get a benefit out of that. So it's something to watch. And the other thing I wanted to let you know is I have yet in my entire career ever to see one of the wireless carriers or one of the providers of a system strong arm a town. So we got to give us some money or we won't do this, because oftentimes they're all of our engineers and their bonuses are based on not dropping calls and not having bad service and not being rated bad by RootMetrics, who does all these things. So don't be careful of what you offer, because oftentimes you probably don't need to. They'll stomach the cost of that. And if it's Crown Castle or whoever owns these nodes now, all they'll do is pass it through to the carriers. They'll just charge a little bit more rent, for anything that they do. So it's just good to keep in mind that you have a captive audience with the carriers. I mean, they honestly want the best for all the different people. And Cherry Hills has been a big star for them for the longest time. So you're likely to get good results when you talk to them.
To that point, then why haven't they? I mean, it's been
Well, there could be a
15,
depreciation.
and we did have discussions, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
We did. We talked with Zayo about installing new towers, basically trying to help the areas that are in blue on the 20-foot map. And so that was going down Bellevue, up University. We were very handcuffed with how we could use the ARPA funds that we received. That was from COVID. Those ARPA funds at the time were extremely limited to infrastructure projects, most of which we didn't have on our CIP program. And so this was an opportunity to spend those dollars on fiber that we could use for other things that weren't related to cell service anyway, right? We can use it for traffic signals or any number of other things. And if that also then made it more attractive for the carriers to come on board, it's a win-win, if you will. That is what they said they were not interested in at the time, is these new towers where we would basically provide the hard costs except for the tower itself. And so that was a no. The question still is valid, and we don't know. We really don't know. So that would be the purpose of these conversations, is to find out.
There could be some reasons, like antenna technology has changed even the last 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years might have made the difference in terms of their depreciation of the asset. And
Yeah.
so there may be some explanations. Just have to ask the questions.
So let me also ask the council then for input. I know we've talked a little bit about whether this coverage is enough of improvement, and it sounds like the consensus is that it's worth pursuing further. What we haven't heard anybody talk about is a 50-foot pole is no joke. I mean, it's almost twice as tall as what's there now. We know that 100 feet certainly provoked the ire of people in that area, particularly in those three main vicinities. This is 50 feet in 13 locations. How do you feel about that?
Well, you could, it doesn't have to be an all or none proposition. It could be some it's more acceptable to have a 50 and others not. But in any event, I'd like to see what, again, the cost benefit is, and then maybe it's asking our public what they think. Not tonight, of course.
Yes,
Can I
Councilor
comment
Rollins.
on that? Yeah. So I'm where Councilor Heller is. I think we have a duty to explore and see what the cost benefit is. And yes, 50 feet is tall. I think we need to get more input before we approve. I don't think we're approving
No, I'm
50
just,
foot tonight.
yeah.
We are saying that we want to get more information and pursue this as an alternative
The
solution.
mayor's point is a good
And-
point. 50 feet is 50 feet.
Yes, and I mean, I think it would be naive of anyone here to think that if we pursued this further, that we wouldn't have times 13.
Opposition to it.
Yeah, and, you know, and
Let's
so I
see
just
what
want to
the-
make sure that everybody
let's see
is
what the
going into
cost
that with your eyes wide
benefit is.
open.
And I agree with that, but the thing is, and I did think this was funny, is that when we had the master plan, we said we were going to investigate, and we had our criteria, and it was 100-foot towers, which we knew would take action by the city, take action by council, et cetera. But then when we go down the rest of the road, it's like going, okay, we're going to poke the bear. This is not the 100-foot. 50-foot is poking the bear. And that's what we're actually asking you to do, is to go out and poke that bear. And these guys could come back and go, you know what, we're doing it. And we're not going to charge you a dime. And people could get upset about 50 foot. And that bear is moving. And you ain't going to stop him. Okay, that's an important, I mean, I've always been amused at that.
That's
at the end of the
exactly my
day.
point.
Yeah,
That
that's-
they say, oh, you're right.
Frankly, that's.
Let's go do
that's,
it.
That, just to put it plainly, that's a risk of you providing direction to us to engage in conversations.
Well, and I think it's also,
We have an obligation.
but I think it's also important to look at the look of these poles and equipment is very different than what would have been on the top of a 100-foot pole. Yes, 50 feet is no joke. I am assuming that our citizens will give us a whole lot of response as to 50 feet. So guessing now, how much will it block my mountain view? How much will it block, whatever it is that I want to be able to see? What do I feel about 50 feet just in general as a height? We allow our homes now to be up to 35 feet. So if you're really only talking about a 15-foot differential between the top of some of the homes in the village and what this pole is going to be. Is that an unacceptable delta? I'm assuming we're going to hear a whole lot about it from a whole lot of people, but this is far less intrusive at the 50-foot level than what we were looking at before. Again, that goes into the whole cost-benefit analysis, to the point that when we talked about at 50 feet, we're talking about 5.1 miles of our 6.3 square miles. I'd also be curious to know just what ratio of the population of the city is in the area that's not, because those are both, that 1 mile area around the country club and around Glenmore is some of our less dense area. And not to say that I'm willing to trade off those people, but I think it is an important criterion for us to look at and say, yeah, it's 20% of our area is still not covered, but what is our percentage of population that is no longer covered?
And I think the overlay, one of the maps that had, one of the slides before keep going. There, so I think this gives you an idea. You see this, the blue area around Glenmore is, some of it is the golf course down there, and some of it is these houses. This area over here in the southwest is a lot of houses. This, all right, can you go to the one that's like a 40 or a 50? This is the 20. I was like, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, so here's this is, houses over here. This is mostly golf course. There are, when you look at the river, there's a lot of houses up in here. Cherry Hills North is in there. There's the bottom corner of Mansfield Heights. So it's not, I don't know that, without counting houses, it's going to be hard to tell, but
No, point taken. I mean, I just was trying to.
But it is a good yeah, no, it's a good point. If it was all the golf course, then I think that's,
Well, my understanding is you can't use your phone on the golf course anyway.
so well, there you go.
Isn't that a Cherry Hills rule that you can't have?
You can't make calls on your phone, you can't use texts.
I think I'm hearing direction from council to ensure staff goes to research this question about what you can do on the
Yes, I
golf
think
course. So
that
we will
is-
report back after playing 18.
Okay.
I guess the only other thing, and the question about how tall the trees get, I guess becomes kind of relevant. I mean, if the trees are going to get 80 feet tall in the next 10 years, I don't know. I mean, we can at least look at what, I have no idea how tall trees get, really
They
tall.
have a limit, right? I mean, they don't,
Some do.
they don't get infinitely
We will.
tall,
But
so
that was the point of my, that was before.
They are, yeah.
No, but I don't know. I mean,
We could do some additional research on that as well.
yeah.
No, but
Let me take
Counselor, that was my
information
point
down.
is the delta is that until a tree is too tall so that it negates the effect of these new things might be a short enough period of time that technology moves us
Could be.
to some other thing
just-
at some point. So
Just
I don't think
curious.
I'm looking at this as a permanent solution that will be for eternity. I'm looking at this as a bridge to whatever the next technology is and whether trees can defeat it.
I would be surprised if we had any 70-foot trees in Cherry Hills Village. I mean, there's got to be a limit to how they, I mean, it's, we've got big ones, but. Not a tree. We don't have any code regulations against trees. Okay, but I think that sounds like the consensus of the council. Did anyone have any further comments? Okay, thank you. Please do that.
And I will say, once we get a better idea about what a timeline looks like, we will communicate that to council, either via email or weekly update or in a subsequent council meeting where we'll just let you know, hey, it's looking like it's going to be another 6 weeks, or hey, it's in 2 weeks, or whatever it might be. Does that sound good?
And I think this is a fair statement to make too, because our citizens are interested as well, is that nothing else is going to be done on cell phones until this whole thing's been investigated, till this string has been run out at that point in time. That's when council will come back and take it up again, and in the interim, we ain't.
Unless in the unlikely circumstance that the carriers themselves decide to do something.
Well, we're
Which
not
they can
doing
do,
it. They can,
right.
whatever they do, we can't control that. But-
Well, and Mayor, my comment about the health impacts, I understand that we're preempted, that if somebody came in and wanted to do this,
Yeah.
and it was unfortunately unhealthy, there's nothing we could do about it. So I just think if we are going to get behind the idea, that was the point of my question, that I would like to make sure that we are meeting our diligence by saying that if we are encouraging this, cost or no cost, that we aren't bringing our citizens to a problem, so, or at least knowing what that is.
Okay. Thank you for that. We will move on to there is no new business. We'll move on to reports. I have two things to report. I emailed everyone this morning. Hopefully you saw that House Bill 1168 died. Today it was laid over again. That was the Yigbee bill, and so we have dodged another land use overreach for now. I would not be surprised if it doesn't try to come back next year. But then I think there may be some significant changes in the dynamics, or maybe not significant, but there will be new people in the following legislative session, a lot of new people. And so that could be.
Mayor, can I
Good,
ask, did you
worse.
hear from Senator Bridges? Did he call you on this?
He texted me. There was a little bit of movement, a little bit of a fire drill yesterday, because evidently, so it had been, it passed the House, it passed out of the Senate committee, and then it was going to second reading on the Senate floor. There's a second reading and then a third reading, and then it goes to the governor's desk. It has been on the calendar for second reading on the Senate floor for every day for the last month, maybe longer, and they just kept laying it over to the next day and to the next day. I don't know for sure what that was about. My guess is that they knew they didn't have the votes to pass it on the Senate floor, and that nobody wanted to vote no. Nobody wanted it to fail. They didn't want to withdraw it because it was coming from the governor. And so they just kept laying it over, either in hopes that someone would change their mind, or just with the knowledge that it wasn't going to go anywhere, and this way nobody had to actually take a position one way or another. Whatever that might have been, I think it's good news for us that we have avoided that for the time being. I did reach out to Senator Bridges yesterday when I got word that there had been maybe one or two senators had changed their minds. There's if you watch what's going on there, a lot of deals get made in the last 48 hours, 72 hours of the session. And so there's a lot of, if you'll support my bill, I'll support yours, or whatever it might be. So evidently a couple of senators did change their votes. And I did reach out to Senator Bridges. I don't know if he had anything to do with what happened. I don't know. But yes, it has died.
Well,
So-
Madam Mayor, may I? One of the things that I believe I had read somewhere along the way was that it was lacking votes, but it wasn't lacking votes on the concept of allowing the uses and the height and the density, all of the land use issues, that where it was lacking the votes was in the way that right now church properties or nonprofit entities that would have been able to make use of the statute are tax exempt. And if you turn these into residential properties, the question became more one of how the properties are valued for purposes of property tax, how to tax, and where that money would go versus the concept of the land use. It seems the legislature didn't have a problem with allowing the land use, unfortunately.
I think a lot of them didn't. I don't exactly know where each senator, came down on their own. But yes, the property tax issue was one. I do know that Senator Bridges had told me that he was very concerned about the big block of property at the intersection of Colorado and Hamden, and that he would have needed significant amendments in order to be really supportive of it. But he wasn't completely opposed to the idea. I mean, to be fair to your point. And that's why I say, there's potential that we could see it again. The only other thing that I had to report, and I meant to add this to the agenda, and I'm sorry that I didn't, but I did get a request from the Highline Canal Conservancy to sponsor their Dine for the Highline event, which is in September. We have done this in the past. I don't know if we did it last year, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
We have not done that in the past.
Well,
looked
we
into
have-
it. So it could, I'm not sure if a council person was invited by somebody else who had a table, but the city,
Well, we made they would come and ask us every year for a $10,000 contribution that wasn't exactly the same as sponsoring the event.
and
Is that what you were going to say, Lauren?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we still do that.
Okay,
We just don't bring it to council because you guys approve it in the budget.
okay.
But we do it, it's a partnership.
Okay, so I guess I would need to clarify that, because I know in previous years that we were given, as a sponsor of the canal, we were given tickets to the Highline, Dine for the Highline event. And so I was conflating those two things together. So I think what I'm hearing, and maybe I'll just need to get more information and bring it back at a next council meeting, One thing I want to make sure everybody knows, particularly our new council members, is that the city does have a policy that we don't contribute to we don't make charitable contributions. I mean, as you might imagine, we get requests from a lot of very worthy causes, but we have always been sensitive to the fact that this is taxpayer money. People don't get the choice whether to give it to us or not. And you can imagine scenarios where you could be supporting things that there is no cause that every single person in this village would agree to support. And so we have traditionally said that we don't do that. So let me find out then a little bit more information if this is an additional request on top of the money that we have already donated that. We know that. I'll take it offline and we can, if we need to bring it back to council, we'll do that. That's it for my report. Let's start down here. Councilor Fisher.
Okay, thank you. On April 3rd, I attended, speaking of the Highline, with Emily Black, the biannual meeting of the Highline Canal Collaborative Leadership Group. I learned a lot. It was fascinating to hear how the communities across this whole region are starting to make progress towards enhancing the canal, mostly for the future, right? And I also gained a better appreciation for how our city and the other partners in this are approaching these new opportunities for stormwater management. The leadership meeting was followed by the annual State of the Canal presentation, which was good, not quite as interesting to me as the leadership group. And then also on April 27th, I took my 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and 11-month-old grandchildren to Earth Day at Quincy Farm. They all absolutely loved it, and I want to acknowledge the Cherry Hills Land Preserve leadership and many Quincy Farm volunteers who made that event possible for our community. It really was geared towards younger families, I think. So fortunately, I have grandchildren because I'm not a younger family anymore. But the parking directions were clearly communicated. The signage was great. There was a really good blend of sort of fun stuff and educational stuff, and it all aligned with both Earth Day and Quincy Farm's vision. So I loved it, and I just wanted to say kudos to that. And then probably when Director Workman has his turn, I was hoping that you would mention whether or not you've heard back from the city of Denver on the 4901 South Monaco.
I've not heard anything since
No?
we sent the letter.
Since you sent those wonderful comments.
No, not heard anything.
If you remember, that's that property.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Councilor Robinson.
I have nothing to report.
Councilor McGuire.
Oops. I don't have anything to report. I did want to commend the police department on the seasonal crime awareness piece that was in the report this month, and suggest that we consider putting that in the crier, if it's not already in the crier, or maybe even mailing it out. I don't know what the cost is of mailing a piece of paper out to everybody in the village. It may not make sense, but I just thought there was a lot of good information and just a reminder to people, you got to be aware, you got to be aware, you got to be aware. So I just wanted to make that comment, but I thought that was a great piece to put in there. So that's all.
Mayor Pro Tem Holland.
I have nothing to report, but I too wanted to just say that I thought Earth Day was a tremendous success. Hats off to the Land Preserve and to staff, and Emily, she's not here, I guess, but it was terrific. The barn looks terrific. There's a lot going on over there, and we're going to have a good discussion in 2 weeks to talk a lot more about it.
And don't forget the ribbon cutting for the new
that's
barn
right,
prior
yeah.
to the meeting. I'm sure that'll come up, but Councilor Eber.
Couple of little things. One, I too just wanted to comment that I went to the Quincy Farm Earth Day. It was great. The only person or group of people that I would add to thank is I noticed that there were a lot of Kent students that were manning a lot of the booths, and I think that they were knowledgeable and helpful. I don't know how they got roped into doing that, but the people specifically at the bee table were quite informed about beekeeping, and I noticed there were a number of Kent students, so thank you to them for helping make Quincy Farm a great success. I would tell you that there were people that were young and there were old. I mean, it was amazing. The idea to give away small seedlings for people to plant, I saw people walking out of there like they were holding gold. I mean, it was amazing how excited they were about planting trees. And, you know, there were people who, many people had come in on bicycles, and the bike storage area where everybody got off was full. Strollers, I think, were in that same category, that they must not be allowed on the rest of the farm because there were strollers all right in that one area. There were lots of people out on the trails, the nature trails, all around on the west side, just enjoying. I can't tell you what a wonderful morning it was. The views were fabulous. People were all commenting about how did we not know this was not, you know, that this was available to us. So again, the more we are doing, the more people are appreciative of the fact that we have this property. And I just, you know, think it was a great event. The second thing I'll mention to you is that I had an interesting conversation with one citizen who I'm not going to identify, but it was in the context of the state legislature and a lot of the land use bills. And I mention it only from the standpoint of how much can you do and still have to do more. The particular person said, how is it that we didn't know about all these things going on at the state legislative level that are really devastating to Cherry Hills? And I said, well, you know, we have articles in the Crier every month, and I went through basically the list of the way that we disseminate information, and the comment that I got back was, well, that would require us to go do all these things and find all these things. And I was a little bit surprised, but the comment was, well, we should have a specific flyer or bulletin mailed to every one of our homes or posted to every one of our doors on all of these different things. And I'm kind of going like, you know, we do our best to disseminate information, but I think there's a little bit of responsibility that goes both ways on behalf of our citizens, that they've got to be interested and look at what we're doing instead of us bringing everything. So I just thought that was, you know, I don't know how many other people are of that same ilk, but there are at least one or more of them that I have run into. Third thing, you may have seen the headline that Denver just recently decided, I think at the last week, that they are not going to renew their
Front
contract
cameras.
on license plate readers. Not because they didn't find it informative and helpful from a crime standpoint, and Commander, you can talk a little bit more about this probably, but they were concerned I think about some of the Big Brother concept and that, you know, everywhere is being surveilled. So they're not going to go away from what the article said in the next number of months, but they're not renewing the contract. And
If you read between the lines, it also sounded like perhaps there is a disagreement between the Denver City Council and the Denver mayor on that point, because what the council basically denied was extension of the contract, but there's still money available within the existing contract. And that's why they have said, the mayor's office has said, we're going to continue to spend the money that's been allocated. And I believe I read, you know, and then kind of hope to work around the edges a little bit to maybe change some minds, because it has been incredibly effective in reducing the amount of stolen, or I guess, I don't know, it said reducing the amount, but I imagine they're still stolen, but they
They're
just
keeping
cover
the
them.
cameras.
Yeah.
They're keeping the cameras even after the allocated money runs out. They are not removing the
Yes.
cameras. They are just not continuing the contract at the time, for the time being.
Yes.
So,
And then the last thing I'll mention, and it goes a little bit to one of the items that was on our agenda tonight, which was the cooperative agreement with, I believe it was Arapahoe County, on some of the communications, is that many of you know I have a relationship with Temple Sinai, and in talking with many of the people at Temple Sinai, specifically about the security issues that Temple Sinai is going through as a result of the current climate that we unfortunately live in for that. The comment was made that they have had to use their emergency system a couple of times. And while they fully appreciate the fact that Denver police comes rapidly, it was still 10 minutes at the last time. And I don't know if that's an acceptable response time, but many of the folks that I was talking to said that in 10 minutes, that wasn't, from a Temple Sinai perspective, adequate. And, you know, since we are close, it just ran in my head, and I will defer to all the other folks who know more about this, of whether or not we have that cooperation agreement that would allow our officers in something like that. I know we have it with Greenwood, and I think Inglewood, but do we have it with Denver that allows our officers in a critical event to go to places in Denver?
And I can talk to that real briefly. I mean, ultimately, if there's an incident occurring and somebody needs our help, we're going to go. The biggest challenge is finding out about that. Where we have a greater benefit with Inglewood and Greenwood is they have a better relationship with Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department and the dispatch there. They have an easier way to get a hold of us and relay that communication. Having Denver's dispatch service and Arapahoe counties, they don't communicate too often. So that's kind of where the delay is. And quite honestly, it would really rely upon Denver to reach out and request our assistance. But if anybody does, absolutely we will be there in a heartbeat. We had an incident a few months ago at TJ High School over here where they did need our help, and we were there before any of their units were.
Commander, if I might just also follow up on that question, 10 minutes to respond to a Denver call for service is probably not that unusual sort of citywide for their metrics. We have a different standard here for a call for service goal. So part of that is the dispatch coordination, but part of that is also just the different services and the different response times.
Thank you. No other.
Thank you. Counselor Heller.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, tomorrow is the next meeting of the Centennial Airport Community Noise Roundtable. I'll report back both on the substance of it, but also it is a hybrid meeting, so a little lobbying here. I'll tell you how that goes. It is interesting. I'm starting to swim in the data a little bit, and I believe we're the only jurisdiction, but we certainly had 0 complaints, noise complaints from Cherry Hills residents, so kind of interesting. Some of the surrounding ones were low, but nonetheless. And the second is a little bit tardy, that city manager and I did meet with Director Sokol from South Metro Fire Rescue. He's the director over District 2, which Cherry Hills Village is in, and confirmed several things. They're going to come speak with us, but I think it's good to start talking or thinking about it. They will either have a mill levy or a sales tax. I learned something new, but he thought probably a mill levy increase as much as 33%. So it's a big increase. My suggestion to Mayor and other councilors is when they're here is to obviously politely, but ask questions along the lines of how they're going to be stewards of the money. There's a lot out there that city manager shared and just heard about maybe their financial stewardship isn't exactly where it needs to be.
It's funny you say that, because I should have mentioned that they did present to the Arapahoe County mayors, managers, and commissioners this past Friday, and there were a lot of questions, and some of them were not very polite. I mean, some of them were pretty direct around management of funds. There's also, just so everyone knows, that most municipalities are very protective of sales tax. That's a really big deal for them. And so most people most municipalities are really opposed to sales tax. So it'll be interesting.
Chris made that clear to
yeah,
Sokol,
it'll be interesting when they come to present. I did find it also interesting that we do have the the lowest mill for fire services of really any of the other metro.
Yeah, but
districts.
that is the issue. It's also the highest tax base.
Yes, well,
of
Exactly right.
anyone else in the state.
That
And
point came
and
up too.
obviously,
That's
it's a
come up.
quotient. But the one, I think two other things I'd say, and then I'll yield to Chris, that they do have a real economic downturn they're dealing with because they are property, much like us. They're very dependent on property tax, and commercial property tax revenue is down. Maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the only other thing I guess I would add to that conversation, I think it was interesting. There was a lot of questions directed at the fire district. There were some that weren't questions; they were just flat out statements, promises to say, if you go for a sales tax, we will campaign against you.
Yeah.
Very, very pointed comments. While we don't
Large
foresee,
jurisdictions.
yes, while we don't see a sales tax increase on the horizon here in Cherry Hills Village anytime soon, you may be wondering, what's the big deal? Why do we care? I do think there is the principle of the matter. The legislature changed that availability for fire districts to go for a sales tax increase just like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, whenever it was. Again, that is being met with a, hey, stay in your lane kind of sentiment from everybody who relies on sales tax. So there is the principle of the matter here as well. So there's only so many bites at the apple that you're going to be able to get from taxpayers on sales tax before they hit their limit, before taxpayers hit their limit. And if that available limit is being chewed up by people who have an opportunity for property tax, I think that's viewed very negatively by a lot of cities. So I would encourage you to ask questions when they do come in June.
And Chris, along those lines, I think I had a senior moment there. The second point around questions is not only being good financial stewards, but quality of service. And I think we all think about, we have an engine company, across the street. It is the slowest fire station in the system. Director Sokol confirmed. But as a result of that, they run their hazmat for the entire district out of here. So that fire station.
Oh, when you
empty.
say slowest, you mean, I thought you meant like
Least number
response
of-
times. You mean
No,
like
no,
in
no.
terms of how many calls
And
they
number
get?
of calls, right?
Okay, yes.
So as
I was
a
like, really?
consequence,
Okay.
That engine is actually out of service a lot.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we don't end up an island here. There's no more mutual aid to the conversation we were just having before
Yeah.
with Englewood, because Denver Fire runs it. And so, we think of that fire station being staffed. It is not a lot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Councilor Robinson.
A question for the commander. So I'm serving on the Opioid Abatement Council, and one of the items that's been identified from the other cities in Arapahoe County is a need for a detox facility for people that are, drunk or intoxicated, picked up by the police, rather than take them to the jail. To take them to a facility. And I just wanted any insight you have. Is that an issue for us in Cherry Hills? Have you seen that? Would that be a benefit? Any comments on that would help me in my conversation later this week in our board meeting.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't see that need too often here in Cherry Hills, but I will say that we do have a relationship with a detox facility. I don't have the name with me right now. We actually just switched to a new facility that we're using. Extremely easy to work with and to use, and we can take our intoxicated folks there if we need to, and we drop them off and they completely take care of it. So we do have a relationship with a facility that we're already using.
You know, is that in Aurora? Is that a facility in Aurora? Or, because I've been told there's not one in the South Metro area.
Well, there's
It would,
one at
yeah, I
Porter
believe it's in
Hospital.
Aurora or in the southern Denver area.
There is one but maybe it's full there because is it 4901 Monaco, that started because they wanted to turn that into a detox facility, and that ruffled a lot of feathers, so they backed off of that plan. But at the presentation, Guardian Recovery that was looking at that building gave a lot of info. They, specifically said, it's not a detox facility. We run one of those, and it's at Porter, right? It's the one over on Downing. Yes, that's correct. So that's South Metro. I don't know why they would say there isn't maybe it doesn't have law enforcement
trying to
drop off.
gather,
I
so,
don't
that's
know.
helpful.
Maybe it's not.
That's helpful.
I don't know a lot about detox facilities, so maybe it doesn't meet the criteria that they're referring to.
But we do have a relationship, with the facility. I can get you that information if you like.
Okay, well, city manager.
I will let staff go first.
Our annual spring cleanup is May 17th. And we always offer to any of our residents that observe the Sabbath on that Saturday, just give me a call directly. We can work out dropping off your paint, your electronics, your brush. We can't take your shredding. I won't be responsible for anybody's financial information. But if anybody feels like they can't make it on Saturday, then we will make accommodations as much as we can.
Did I just hear you say there's not going to be shredding this year?
No, I'm saying if you observe the Sabbath on Saturday,
Oh,
as some
I'm
of
sorry, I missed
our
that. Okay.
Jewish residents do, I get a handful of calls each year, and we try to accommodate those residents the day before.
Yeah, so you can bring shredding on Saturday, but, no, he's saying you will. Not on Saturday.
On Friday. So, no, we can't take your shredding early. We can, if you.
You can't take it early. You can take shredding, they just don't want to hold it overnight.
Yeah, I won't
And be
take anybody's.
responsible, yeah.
So what I'm saying is, we offer this only on Saturday. And our Jewish residents sometimes say, hey, that we observed the Sabbath, we can't do it on that day, so we make accommodations. But we cannot make accommodations for shredding.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, sorry to be.
That's all right. Thank you. Director Workman.
No update for me tonight.
Commander.
I have no report, but I will touch on Councilmember Eber's point on the flock cameras. I can attest for us here, the flock cameras have been extremely beneficial, not only in proactively identifying bad people that are coming into the city and being able to make contact with them before they do any further damage here, but also investigatively. It has been a greater benefit to us. We've been able to solve a tremendous amount of cases just by using this system. So it's been incredibly beneficial for us. And the last thing I would say is just, I will preemptively throw out there for this weekend coming up to all the mothers out there, I wish you all a very happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
So nice. I have a question about the flock cameras. So I also read that some people are concerned with who else might get their hands on that data. So are you aware of requests for the flock camera data gatherers to share that data with others?
So there is an option within the Flock system to share images with other agencies. Yes, all of those requests. So for example, if we want to have access to Arapahoe County or Denver or any other agency that has Flock cameras, we would have to send a request to them, and then they would either approve or deny it. Now, when you make those requests, the access is limited in compared to what they have access to. But yes, we do currently share with other local law enforcement agencies in the area that have requested.
Yeah, the opposite's also true. We own our own cameras in my neighborhood, and so obviously the HOA has access, and we have granted Cherry Hills Village Police access to ours as well.
So I think this
both
is.
ways.
I think it's more like ICE.
I think this is a
It's not
really
your
interesting.
HOA.
So I can tell you,
Conversation.
yes, to his point, so we are not authorized to grant access to anybody else's Flock camera data other than the ones that the city owns. I can tell you for a fact that we have not granted access, nor have we been requested access from any federal agency.
So I remember when Flock camera, this was a long time ago, and a neighborhood in Cherry Hills Village wanted to install one of these cameras, and I remember having a conversation around, how are you going to store the data? This was before cloud storage. How are you going to store the data? Who's going to have access to it? How do you, security, privacy and security issues were at the forefront of my mind. I can tell you from 12 years of serving on city council, I think I am alone in that concern. I fully expected, to be honest, when the chief came in and we started installing these cameras, that we would get at least a few. I mean, we did get one, but I thought we would get several. Probably, no, people seem to love it and are completely willing, in my opinion, to trade their privacy for what they perceive as security. So more power to you.
It's amazing what a little crime spree might do.
Yeah. So
But I don't know what expectation of privacy you have.
well, I don't.
And it's
Not necessarily, but we don't have to rehash the
I agree.
discussion. But it's the I want to know if my wife left the neighborhood last night at 10 o'clock. I mean, I don't know, that you can see some not so great uses of this data, but nobody else seems to share that concern, and so that's okay.
I do have a question, though, for council. If someone made a Freedom of Information request for the city's flock information, is that discoverable? Maybe discoverable isn't the right word there, but.
Release, yeah, subject to release. Well, depends on the asker. There's a lot of things there.
It's not Cora, though. I mean,
Criminal Justice Act, Records Act, right? If this is part of an investigation, there's a lot of dimensions to the question, so I don't know that I could answer it depending on who the requester is, but.
I'm not sure it's worth spending any time on. I was just curious.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
but it's not just a Cora. It's not like any citizen could come and ask for it. It's criminal justice.
I'm not bound by the same legal impediments that Kathy is. I can just tell you what I heard. I was at the Glenwood Springs City Managers Conference in Denver, was getting rid of their cameras. They're getting rid of the service. They are not getting rid of the physical cameras, getting rid of the service because there was a concern they may be compelled to provide that information to a certain agency. And therefore, as a way to short circuit that they basically would say, we don't have that data to give to you. Now, whether or not that's accurate, I have no idea. Whether or not that's true, I have no idea. But whether or not the fact that we would be compelled to provide that data, I have no idea.
No, but that's the
Well,
that is the
thank you for that
concern.
information.
That's the discussion. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean,
We're going to put this in the category if we hope we don't have to find out.
Yeah, well, and you see, I think given the current climate, you can imagine how that would absolutely play out, is that somebody would attempt to compel it, and then we'd learn. Then we would find out whether you can legally be compelled to do that. Okay, City Clerk.
As was mentioned prior to the next meeting, about 4 o'clock, we're going to do the ribbon cutting for the big barn at Quincy Farms. So look for more detailed logistical information in your email coming up.
Thank you. That day, the following day is Cherry Creek High School graduation, by the way, for anyone who cares.
By the
City
way,
Attorney?
I wanted to just also thank Kathy for the new little index of page numbers to items in the agenda. Very helpful. And Laura, sorry.
Yeah.
I
noticed that
wish
too.
I were that good.
Yeah. I noticed that too. No, go ahead.
Okay. I actually have something to share with you guys tonight. I just wanted to bring to your attention, CML has sent out a notice about 2 laws that have passed and with a template veto request letter. I can forward it to you guys if you want, but one is the House Bill 251147, Fairness and Transparency in Municipal Court, which mandates municipal penalties match state sentencing and limits judicial discretion on live streaming. The first part of that means things are a lot lower, right? The ability to impose sentences is a lot lower. So CML's vigorously opposed this to no avail. And then the second one is the Senate Bill 25001, Colorado Voting Rights Act. And that one allows an individual organization to file suit alleging voter suppression, voter dilution, or an unlawful voting prerequisite based on gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation. Empowers the AG's office to investigate potential violations, file suit, or intervene in a suit. And it has the potential, I think, to throw municipal elections into a great amount of disarray.
And I think it also has provisions that require municipal elections to be held in November as opposed to, which doesn't affect us because we already do.
I'm not
but-
sure, I haven't read it recently, but from what I recall, I think it was that if you're not holding it in November, the chances of some of this disproportionality and unfairness happening
Go way up.
are way, way up, right?
Okay.
yeah, it just makes sense, right? So, that may be articulated in there, it may be in
Okay.
whereas, I'm not sure. But
I didn't pay as much attention to that provision since we already conduct our elections in November, but I know that was a lot of the conversation around CML. And the other big objection, and I didn't follow whether it was amended and what those amendments were, but the other big objection from CML is that it evidently doesn't apply to statewide elections.
Right, of course.
Yes,
Only
there's a
applies-
carve out.
Yet again.
Yeah,
Yet again.
yeah, carve out for state, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
We're just gonna tell everybody,
Well-
do as I say, not as I do.
And if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, I believe similarly, the somewhat helpful bill that would provide a little leeway and assistance to local.
Quorum requests.
Quorum requests.
That was vetoed.
Approved. We should applaud that, right? We're kind of bad. They actually did something I think we would be very appreciative of, and then it got vetoed at the governor's desk.
It allowed more, it divided quorum requests into 3 different categories, journalists, commercial use, and everything else. And it allowed longer fulfillment time for quorum requests for both everybody else, and then even longer fulfillment times for people looking to use the information for commercial gain. And that was vetoed.
Right. So if anyone's interested in getting this link, or I'm happy to forward to you, just reach out to me offline. Yeah, thanks.
And there were also several around cell phone towers and the shot clocks, and I guess I haven't checked in on those lately to see where those ended up, but.
Yeah, we still have some homework to do.
I haven't seen where that came out. There's just been a flurry. It's hard to keep track of it right
Yeah.
now because the Denver Post literally has like a ticker.
And they don't update the legislative website. I mean, it's
The State House report is, yeah. and
Yeah,
they
I mean,
can't. They're too busy fighting in the trenches.
totally. So there's no way of really knowing where things stand right at this exact.
I'm at the point of wake me when it's over and we'll figure out what we need to spend time
One more
on.
day.
Right.
Yeah, one more day. All
And
right.
so I'll bring it on home. So I did want to congratulate and thank staff for all their efforts related to the scavenger hunt that was held in John Meade Park. We had over 200 attendees, and from all reports, people had a grand old time. So hats off to staff. If you pass that along, I'd appreciate it. And then finally, I do want to emphasize the City Clerk Gillespie mentioned the 4 o'clock start time off-site on a city council night. If, to the extent folks could carpool, that would be much appreciated, just to be sensitive to nearby neighbors regarding parking at Quincy Farm. It's not a giant public event. It's not like we're gonna, but still in an effort just, it might be helpful. I personally love these kinds of events. We have enough topics that we cover where we get slings and arrows no matter which direction we go. It's nice to have an event where it feels good. The interesting thing is we'll come right back here and then have some really intense conversations about the exact property that we just went and celebrated, so.
If anyone would like
Should we
to,
suggest that we meet here at 3:45
or if you want
Can
to
we do
park
that?
at my house, you can walk, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm happy to give you the address, and there's plenty of parking.
All righty, great.
That's it.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn? I assume there's a second. All in favor? We're adjourned. There we go. At 8:33 PM. Thank you all.
I did my best, Dan Schoen. So moved.